well, so thanks for joining us. As Gil said, my goal tonight is to really help you understand the proposal that's before the city and really talk about the process and the analysis that we did to kind of develop this program. And after that, we'll have a lot of opportunity to sort of dive into the details and the specific pieces of information you need. David, could you do the, thanks. And as Gil said as well, I've been working with the city for about 10 years on affordable housing and housing policy. I think I've met a lot of you through the housing element as well, which is our city's, every 5 years we update our strategy for achieving affordable housing. And that's one of the reasons we're doing this, is because through that work, we're able to look comprehensively at what our housing needs are and sort of then make some next step actions for what we need to do to achieve our housing goals. So that's our first place. Also, as both the supervisor and Gil mentioned, there's long been a state law on the books that says if you build affordable housing, you have to get a bonus. The municipalities must give it to you. To put a finer point on how we've been implementing that, for the past 4 years, we've been saying, great, you're building an 100% affordable housing project, you can get special legislation to get that density bonus. We've done about 15 of those projects. The one I always refer to as an example is on Florida and 19th Street. It's called Mosaica. It's a very beautiful building. It used to be a giant parking lot and flea market for a long time. Now it's affordable housing on top. They got extra density so the city could stretch our investment in that property a little bit further. And then they replaced the community space on the ground floor. In 2013, the court said, even if someone's building affordable housing because you require them to, you must offer them a density benefit. When that court ruling came down, we brought together the mayor's office of housing, the city attorneys, planning staff, many people to say, okay, what does this mean for us? We were kind of imagining, maybe the way you might be feeling right now, this means the whole city's kind of just gotten fatter and taller, and we've lost control basically as a municipality. As a place where we have 3 binders full of planning code to regulate our built form, it was really startling for all of us to imagine what that might look like. And that's one of the reasons that we hired David Baker Architects and Libby Seifel, who are financial consultants, to help us really understand what does this mean, this new interpretation from the courts mean to what development will look like in our city. And I'm going to talk through that a little bit, but that is complying with mandatory law. While we were working on this, how many of you are familiar with Proposition K, which passed, that said the city wants to have 33% of the housing affordable? Hopefully many of you voted on that. We had about 66% of San Francisco voters supporting that. That was sort of in the middle of a conversation the city is still having about our affordable housing needs. And that was a conversation between the board and the public around what really is our goal. And within that, there was a little more nuance. There was the identification of a need for middle-income housing. And so that really was another goal that was layered on top of this body of work. We currently don't put any public funding towards middle-income housing. There was an affordable housing bond that was passed this last fall. It's the first time that we've identified a source of funding for middle-income housing. So anyone in that middle-income band either competes on the private market or, as Gil was pointing to, maybe leaves the city. And then, again, this is just one of the tools. There's many other efforts going underway. If you're a close follower of housing policy, you might be overwhelmed with how much extracurricular reading you have. We are updating our inclusionary housing program. We are trying to make the off-site option for inclusionary housing work. We are making all kinds of tweaks around tenants' rights. There's a lot of great work moving forward. This piece is really about how do we get more affordable housing in the new construction projects, and then how do we make sure that we are offering affordable housing for a multitude of household types, so low income, middle income, and moderate. Next slide. So I think I painted a small picture of what it was like when we found out about this court ruling. This is our diagram of the state law. there's these three arrows that are kind of infinite, right? So the state law is very developer friendly in terms of what kinds of benefits are available to a project sponsor. So let's say you're building some affordable housing. It's very prescriptive on what percent density bonus you get, how many extra units. So a density bonus would be, let's say, just to make the math easy, you're building a 100-unit building, and you're maxing out the state program. You could get up to 35% density bonus, so that would be an 135-unit building. That's kind of how the density bonus works. Those numbers are a little bit of a red herring because most of the buildings in the program area won't be 100 units. They're much smaller, but the math is way easier, and I'm doing it publicly, so bear with me on that. So the state is very prescriptive about that, but then the state law says, and you get 1 to 3 waivers. And they don't really describe what they are. They could be sort of anything as long as it makes your building more feasible. So it reduces the overall costs. Examples of this could be, oh, you get to add a bunch of retail because you can make money off of the retail space. You can make your building higher because the top floors would sell for more, and so that would create more revenue. You could reduce the amount of parking so you don't have to build underground. You could not have a rear yard, so you have more space to build. But the state law doesn't define any of these things. It just says you get to pick 1 of the 3. And as long as they don't have a legally defined adverse impact on the city, then the city has to approve them. For us, again, our 3 stacks of binder of planning code, we are very clear about what we want our build form to look like. And it was very alarming to us to have this state law out there just kind of saying, ignore any 3 of the chapters of this book that you've been working on. And within that, it also says you get whatever you need to fit those extra 35 units, as it were. So that could be heights. It could be, again, covering the rear yard. It could be any of the things that you need to make your building bigger. That was really also an issue. It doesn't define the height limit, so you could get 4 extra stories, 8 extra stories, 2, whatever you need. It's really undefined. We weren't really sure what it meant, so we embarked upon a study. And we said, first to David Baker Architects. How many people are familiar with that firm? Anybody work with them? Okay. They've built a lot of buildings throughout the city, both affordable housing and market rate. And we've worked a lot with them over the years. So they're also a local firm. And we said to them, you know our planning code, you know our neighborhood context. If you were given the guidance of the state law, but you were asked to build a really good building, what would it look like? And we asked them to test, I think, about 12 sites throughout the program area. And those 12 sites represent varying height limits, density limits, and neighborhood contexts. And then we had this list of, well, what concessions do we really need to offer? Do we really need to let people cover their full lot? The answer is no, that's really bad urbanism. Do we need to let people have 10 extra stories? The answer is no. So we created a menu. This is what we call our analyzed program, our state analyzed. So based on the analysis of David Baker's work and the analysis of our financial consultant, Libby Seifel, we said, here's, in the San Francisco context, you don't need sort of this infinite and negotiated thing, but you need up to here. Here's a menu, pick 1, 2, or 3. That's it. But remember, we were working on this at the time that the city was saying, we want 33% affordable housing, we want middle income housing. The state law does not require density benefits for middle income housing. And it also, according to our financial analysis, will only encourage project sponsors to go to 13% affordable housing if they're rental, or 20% affordable housing if they're ownership, which is more affordable housing units than our current laws, but still not anywhere close to our 30% and no middle income. So that's why we created what you'll see over here on the third piece, which is our local program, building on the same kind of thinking and the same kind of analysis as the state program. We said, if we wanted to get to 30% affordable housing, financial consultant, what would we need? How many units do you need? And then she gave us some answers for different building types. And then I said to the architects, okay, could you make a building that we would want to have in our neighborhoods? You know, and your constraints are X, Y, and Z. You know, no 10-story additions. So what we have over here for the local program is if you add 2 stories and you regulate density by height and bulk, and you require that at least 40% of the units be 2-bedroom, then yes, we can get 30% affordable to happen. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. But this slide is really just to help you understand that the proposal before you is a state analyzed program, which kind of puts a frame around the state density bonus law and gives us a way to implement that locally in a way that we feel is better. And then also offers a local program, which gets us to our local affordable housing goals. And next I'm going to talk about how the program works. So this is the program area. Because you're here, you probably have seen this map a couple times. It's pretty popular in the media. The blue areas are the areas that are eligible for the program. You guys hear this in and out, or is it working? In and out, can you switch? Okay, so the program area, how do we define it? What does it include? What does it not include? So it includes every district that is currently zoned neighborhood commercial, RC, which is residential commercial, or RM, residential mixed use, or RH3, which is a district that allows 3 units. Why did we pick those districts and not the others? Well, first, what did we leave out? We left out RH1 and RH2. Those are districts that allow 1 or 2 units. We left them out. They're most of the west side and a lot of the south side of the city. We left those out because, as I was talking to Kathy, I don't know where she is right now, earlier today, it doesn't really make sense to have a percentage of affordability when you've got 1 or 2 units. So that's primarily why those are out. This program isn't well fit to them. The second thing we left out was our area plans. So Eastern Neighborhoods and Market Octavia. If I had a laser pointer, I'd point, but sort of the eastern side of the city. We left those out because they're a totally different kind of zoning. They actually don't have density limits regulated by units to lot area. They have density limits regulated by height and bulk. So we've already kind of modernized the zoning in those areas. Those plans were adopted in about 2008. I worked on the Market Octavia plan, maybe you all followed that. We are doing a study similar to this effort for those program areas, asking the same question. What does the state density bonus law look like here? And how can we encourage more affordable housing in these areas? We're starting that study, I think, in a month. So expect a compendium piece of legislation maybe in a year or 2 for that area. What do these districts have in common? They all allow residential. They all either encourage or require commercial uses on the ground floor. They're all within 1/4 mile that is generally considered to be walking distance from the Muni Rapid network. So there are many Muni buses and trains. The Muni Rapid network is the high priority network, place that MTA and the city are investing all of our future revenues and making the highest performing corridors. So we're building housing where we're building transit capacity. And then the next slide. In your neighborhood, in this district, District 2, you can see there are a number of parcels in the program area. I think this is really confusing for people. I've gotten some phone calls that say like, oh, my house is blue, does that mean the city's gonna buy it and knock it down? Or there are 30,000 parcels in the program area. We expect about 240 development projects on 240 parcels. So most of the program area we don't expect to change. The state law doesn't allow us to go in and sort of pick the specific sites. So the program is district-wide. But generally, the program is only feasible on sites that are soft. And every time I say that, people are like, well, what does that mean? It means that what you can build versus what's on the ground, there's a very low ratio. So you only build about 5% of what you can totally build. We've used this kind of methodology to predict where development has happened for the past 10, 15 years. And my team spent some time first projecting it and then going back and looking at our past projections. And it turns out this is a really good way to predict where development happens. That people are looking for parking lots, gas stations, one-story commercial buildings, and moving development there. Partly because the cost of acquiring a property that has housing, that has lots of commercial valuable use, is so high that it doesn't make sense financially to knock it down and develop something new. And partly because the reason people are moving to San Francisco is they like our existing context. So developers, community members, everybody values that, and we have a lot of protections for our existing buildings. We have historic preservation, we have required public hearings around any demolition. I think it's something that's pretty universally valued in our city is our existing building context. Next. Okay, so this is just an overview of what does the state analyzed program look like. How many people know about our inclusionary housing program? So in many municipalities, for the past maybe, well, I don't know about Montgomery, but Montgomery County kind of started this right outside of DC, but most of the rest of the municipalities caught up in the 2000s where we said, housing is really expensive. The federal government has, in the Reagan era, stopped really putting a lot of funds into affordable housing. So we need other creative ways to create affordable housing. So we've created these kinds of laws that are called inclusionary housing that say, when you build market rate housing, you have to make a certain percent of them affordable. It's just part of it. Like you have to make sure that you've got windows, you have to make sure that you've got parking, and you have to make 12% of your units affordable. San Francisco has had programs like this since about 2003. The number has changed. Sometimes it's 12%, sometimes it's 15%, sometimes it's 13 or 17. It's kind of moved around with the economy and with the politics. But we've been doing it since 2003. We've generated about 2,000 affordable units. Some project sponsors prefer not to build the units, and so they pay what we call an in-lieu fee. We've generated about $56 or $60 million in money that we can use to develop affordable housing through this program. We assume that project sponsors that avail themselves of the density bonus program will choose to build the affordable units on site. So that's keeping our inclusionary housing program intact, so your first 12%. Then if you want to max out the state program, you want to get your full 35% density bonus, you might add 1% or 8%, depending on the finances of your building or the physicality of your building, to the project of affordability. That would get you a total of 13 or 20% affordable housing and a 35% density bonus.
Are you saying that a builder could opt for the density bonus and still fulfill his requirement by paying an in-lieu fee?
No, they can't. They cannot do that. So I know why you thought I said that. I was a little bit unclear. Let me clarify. This program is only available for project sponsors that provide the affordable housing on site. So they do have the option to pay the fee. They do have the option to build it off site, but they wouldn't get the density benefit. Let's say they chose to build the units off site, which some projects do. Like, here's my market rate project, here's my affordable project. The affordable project gets the density benefits, so they could build more affordable. Does that make sense? Okay, thanks for catching that. And then just walking through, how does the 30% affordable project work? This is the local program. So you've got 12% at inclusionary, and then you add 18% for middle income households, and in just a minute I'll talk about who is middle income. But then you've got the total of 30% affordable housing. And somebody asked a really great question about what does affordable mean. We've always thought of affordable as being rent control, and we know there's like lots of great benefits to the rent control housing supply, but this is a little bit different. The way we regulate these units is they're permanently affordable to a certain income level. So let's say it's affordable to a middle income person, they buy it or rent it, and then they leave. The next tenant will also be middle income and will also be paying what's considered affordable. So affordable is 30% of your income. So let's say I bought the unit, I qualified at 100% AMI, I live in it for 5 years, and then I decide to move, to the East Bay or whatever. I sell it at exactly whatever is affordable to that same income level. So it's not an equity benefit for me, except for I'm not paying to a landlord, but there's no major gains, I guess. That's that. One thing
What happens if you bought a affordable unit and all of a sudden you go to the president?
my dad will be so proud. That's a great, deep, and nuanced question. So if it's a rental product, let's say I rented the unit and then my income went up to the sky. I'm only able to earn, I think it's 150% or 200% of the qualifying income, and then I'm asked to leave because my income has almost doubled. In the ownership case, we don't have that same requirement because we don't really want to take someone who's an owner and kick them out. So they've got that subsidized unit until they choose to move. What we have noticed by just looking at our affordable housing portfolio, that usually when people's income increase that much, also their household size increases and their desires increase. These are multi-unit buildings. So we have, I share that concern with you. I wish they were all rental, to be totally candid, but we do have some solutions for that.
So somebody has to keep monitoring the income of the people that are renters.
Absolutely. Every year, the Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development monitors the income of all of the tenants who are in these buildings. And there's been some discussion because to date, we've had a slowly growing program. And with this program and several other pieces, we really think the program size will change. And so I think that'll become a more interesting question about how we do that. Okay, so 100% affordable units. So this program has, I talked about the state and I've talked about the local program. We've historically used the state density bonus law for 100% affordable projects. So this program also offers benefits for 100% affordable projects. We say instead of 2 stories, you get 3 stories, and then you also get density regulated by height and bulk. We currently have funding in the pipeline, thanks to those of you who voted for the housing bond and the housing trust fund, for about 2 to 3 projects a year of 100% affordable housing. I think there's been some confusion about whether there will be a rash of buildings that are 3 stories above their existing height limit, and we don't really have the funding in the pipeline to build more than 2 or 3 for the next 5 or 10 years. And I've never in my life seen a not publicly funded 100% affordable project. So I think we have a pretty good handle on where these projects will be and where they're coming from. What's great about this is the Mayor's Office of Housing have acquired a number of sites, especially in the Mission, to build affordable housing. And they're able to rapidly increase the number of units per the dollar we've invested because of this additional height and the number of units they can fit in there. So we're able to stretch our public subsidies that much further. We've been touching on this a little bit, but here are some numbers. Can you all see that in the back? I don't like to read if people can see it. No? Okay. So there's 4 different income levels. There's very low, low, moderate, and middle. The column in the middle gives you a sense of what that income is in San Francisco in 2015 if you were one person. And then on the right, what that income would be if you were a household of 4 people. So I'll read them out loud for those of you in the back. Very low is $36,000 for one, and $51,000, and low is $57,000. Moderate is $85,000, and middle is $100,000. For a 4-person household, very low is $51,000, low is $82,000, moderate is $122,000, and middle income is $143,000 a year. So, and we have these same breakdowns for a 2-person household, 3-person, 5-person, 7-person, all of it. Very low-income households are generally serviced by 100% affordable projects that are publicly subsidized. Our low-income households are serviced by some of our inclusionary if it's rental, and our moderate-income households are serviced by our inclusionary if it's ownership. So under our state program, we would be serving low-income and moderate income. And under our local program, we'd be serving low, moderate, and middle. Does that make sense?
Are you saying that that's what is happening right now?
Currently, our she's asking is this what's happening now, or are we proposing to? So these income levels are recorded every year. Right now, we service the very low with publicly funded projects. Not everybody. No.
But I mean, but I think it gets to be really important because when you're looking at these plans, this involves individuals. And that's why, I'm trying to figure out where I would do better now and how much rent I'm supposed to be able to afford.
Yeah, let me be totally clear. If we were trying to subsidize all of the affordable housing that we needed, I wrote that number down recently. It was something like $50 or $60 billion that we would need, I think, over the next 10 years to meet our AGI needs, to meet our projected affordable housing needs. So with this program, with the programs that we've had for the past several years that have generated 30 to 50,000 existing affordable housing units, we're still reaching to meet our goal. So I'm not saying that we're going to house everybody that needs it through this program. What I'm trying to describe is what are the household types that we're trying to create more opportunities for. So the top band, the very low income, those are 100% publicly funded units. The 2 middle bands, the low and moderate, that's who our current inclusionary housing program services. This program, the program we're talking about tonight, will continue to service the low, the moderate, and also service the middle income households. Next slide. So, trying to guess what you can afford and what you should afford. For a long time, people have said affordable housing means that you're spending 30% of your income on housing. Most San Franciscans are spending about 55% of their income on housing. So most of us are not paying an affordable housing cost, whether it's rental or mortgage. Just to give you a sense of what that would be, what's affordable for I'll just do the 1-person household. We can make these slides are on our website. But a 1-person household who's very low income can afford $900 a month in rent. A low income is $1,400. Moderate income is $2,125. And middle income household can afford $2,500. And that's compared to what an average 1-bedroom apartment is renting at right now is $3,600. So if you, like me, are living in a rent-controlled unit, you've been here for a while, this is less of an issue for you. But if you're trying to move to this city or you're trying to have a child and you'd like to move out of your studio or your 1-bedroom, this is a reality, and I think explains a lot of the churning that Gil was describing. Again, the numbers are over there for a 4-person household, but for the sake of time, I'll kind of skip through that. Oh, that's it. Okay, I thought we had the housing sale costs. Okay, Gil touched on this a little bit as well. There's been a lot of concern about what will happen to the rent control unit I live in, or maybe some of you live in, or the buildings that we love in our neighborhood that are right next door to us. So I'm going to talk, this is going to be a little bit confusing because you're catching us in the beginning of the legislative process. So I'm going to talk to you about the way it was 2 weeks ago and some amendments that have been introduced. So if you don't follow completely, I'll recap. But the way it was 2 weeks ago, or when the mayor and Supervisor Tang introduced it, was, hey, you know what? We do not want to demolish our existing rent control units. They're about 50-some% of our existing housing supply. And some of them are affordable, maybe more, we don't know. They're useful, they're to stabilize our existing residents, they're valuable. Turns out that the affordable housing advocates in LA and the state of California agrees with us. They passed what we call AB 2222, which says if you're using the state law and you're choosing to demolish a rent control unit, you have to replace that rent control unit to be affordable. So that's the way the draft legislation addressed this issue of demolition. So if there are 10 rent control units, and you'd like to build a building there that's maybe got 12 units, you would have to make 10 of them affordable. You probably wouldn't do that. We think that this provides a lot of safety for our existing rent control housing supply. I'm going to walk through an example or two. So we get to play Monopoly for a minute here. On the left, you've got your 4 purple rent control units. This is your parcel, right? Today, without any changes, without this proposal moving forward, somebody could choose to construct a new building on that site and get 6 units. None of those would be required to be affordable. Somebody could also choose to replace it with a larger building, perhaps to the point where they trigger our inclusionary housing requirement, making one of those units affordable. The most common way that we lose our rent control units, by the way, is Ellis Act evictions and owner move-in, so where they change from rental projects to ownership projects. So this top bar, while legally permissible, really doesn't happen in San Francisco very often. Like I said, we have a lot of protections for the existing housing stock. But under this program, you would be required to make 4 units affordable. In this case, it ends up being also 30%. The next slide. But in the next case, where instead of starting with 4 affordable units, you've got 6 rent control, not affordable. You would be required to make not just the 1/3, but the full 6 replacement units be affordable. So we think this also provides pretty good protections for the existing rent control supply. There are a lot of people that are facing eviction. There are a lot of fears about being removed from the community. So Supervisor Breed has introduced an amendment to this legislation that our mayor and Supervisor Tang, the 2 sponsors, support, which says, look, rent control is really important. This idea of losing our existing housing supply is really sort of an important question that we don't want to think, we think this is good, we want to know. So they've asked us to say this program moves forward, though no one can use it on a site with any rent control buildings until the planning department has fully studied this and created a more robust replacement program that includes tenant protections. So I live in a rent control unit. If they choose for some reason to use this program, we were offering right to return, so I would get to move back to that building. But what happens to me for those 2 years? All of those questions, they want solid answers on that before this program applies. So the program had some good protections, but we agree with the supervisor and the community that we will spend a year or so with consultants really studying the rent control question before we allow this program to even be considered to be used on those sites. So that's a really important point. Did I make that crystal clear? Pretty much. Yeah, go ahead.
You say that rent control units would have to be replaced by affordable units. You're not saying that rent control has to be replaced by affordable rental units. Can they be replaced by BMO condos?
That's actually one of the sort of deep turns in this program that has caused us to really think about spending a whole year studying it. Because as proposed, they would be able to replace them with ownership units. And I think I've already showed my cards on this. I wish all of our affordable units were rental. So there might be some really good mechanisms for us to solve that problem. That's one of the many things we'll be looking at this year. Yeah.
I don't know what now is the time for, but where in the equation is our schools and,
Okay.
but I don't see how you can bring more people in. People also want good schools and good transportation.
I will get to that. If you're not asking a clarifying question, let's kind of wait till the end.
Yeah,
And
I
if,
just want to be sure that.
I will get to that. Don't let me forget. But, and then also David, I don't know, he's back there. If you guys have cards, questions that are detailed, let me know. So any clarifying questions? 1, 2, 3, go ahead.
Thank you. Kirsten, I think it would be important to clarify the applicability of this program. And you talked about the soft sites, and those are most likely to be converted. But the fact is, the program is designed to apply to every R3 site, RM site, RM.
That's not a clarifying question.
Well, no, but it is. They need to know that you may think that it's likely that the parking lots will be converted. But now, an R3 or an RM could be converted, and with this game changer of giving them the 2 extra height, the 2 extra stories, they can make a lot more money, because what you're doing is you're making the developer subsidize the middle income. And the real problem is, it's a game changer because they can make the middle income very small. They let out size requirements. So you're creating an incentive.
Okay, I'll address your concerns. Do you have a clarifying question? Yeah.
If someone is put out of a rent control unit and they're allowed to come back, they come back as a rent control unit.
So let me be crystal clear.
And at what rate?
Let me be crystal clear. Because there's such an interest in making sure we get that perfect, what we have agreed to, both the mayor, the supervisors, and the planning department, is until we resolve that, no one can use this program on a site that has rent-controlled units. So to Kathy's point and to yours, about, I don't want to say the wrong number, it's 54 or 57, my mind is a little blurry from vacation, but some number of our total building supply are rent-controlled units. So those buildings are not, those parcels that host those buildings are not eligible for this program. Does that make sense? So
So it hasn't been decided.
what we've decided is we should spend a whole year thinking about it.
So it
Yes,
hasn't been decided.
correct. And one more clarifying question, and then I'm going to move on. That was it. Okay. Okay, I'm almost,
I do have a clarifying question.
Okay.
I just want to understand the chart. So in your original example, you have 6 rent-controlled units.
yes.
And under the new construction, under the kind of revised plan that's in right now, it'll be replaced with a building with 6 rent-controlled units and 6 new units. Correct? So in essence, you're doubling the density to replace the existing rent-controlled units you have already. So the question is, if the community's asked to take increased density, increased population, increased traffic, increased transit, for keeping the same number of units that are there that are rent controlled, where's the benefit to affordable housing?
That's a great question. So those actually weren't really modeled sites. They were trying to help people understand how that one requirement works. In terms of what we think this program will produce, we think it'll produce an additional 5,000 affordable housing units on 240 sites that currently would only host about 900 affordable housing units. So we just went through the low, moderate, and middle. For the low and moderate, we currently could produce about 900 affordable housing units if all of those sites were developed and all of those developers chose to build the units on site instead of paying the fee. This program incentivizes project sponsors to build them on site. It also allows them to provide more units, so they would create 2,000 rather than 900 low and moderate income units, and then 3,000 middle income units. So that illustrative example might have been a little bit misleading, but we do think that by and large, this will create way more affordable housing. I want to talk a little bit about what this might look like.
You have no guarantee that cap of the 240 feet in total.
Can we wait for the Q&A for any further discussion? I see you guys, but I just want to roll through the next couple slides, and then we can have a more focused conversation. Do you have a bunch of the cards already? Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, so what do these look like? So we've been talking about soft sites. This is an example of a soft site on Geary Boulevard near Divisadero, just to give you a sense of what they look like. Here's another one, Geary Boulevard at Spruce. And then, if you could slow that down, I think it's set for Halo speed or something. But this is an actual soft site. I think I talked about, like, someone were wondering, like, how do we know that this is where development will happen? Well, we've seen a lot of development in the past 8-10 years with our area plans. And we looked back. Here's just one of the sites that is at Van Ness Avenue that developed into this building. So, my numbers aren't that good. Anyone 2559 Van Ness? Oh yeah, Filbert. Goodbye.
I just know.
There you go. Apparently I need them. Okay. So, next slide. And so, like I said, we talked to David Baker. He did a lot of, if you've gone to our website, you might have seen these blue boxes, and we did a whole study kind of looking at all of these things. But this is really, what will the building look like, and what will the street look like? The red line is the existing height limit. So on the left, we're showing a soft site, and if it was only built to its existing height limit, what might it look like? And on the right, we're showing, if they did choose the local program, and they did choose to make the building 2 stories higher, what might that building look like?
That doesn't look like a soft site, it's like an existing building.
So the existing building is actually a rendering David Baker's office did on the left. And then we're showing the same rendering or drawing that they did on a soft site with 2 extra stories. It's actually showing the existing street context and just looking at that one site. And then here's another one that we're looking at the building all the way to the right. And this one goes from 50 feet to 75 feet. And then, there's this question about, we're almost done. There's this question about, what are these heights like? How can we propose these heights that are so far above our existing context? So the other thing David Baker's team did is kind of walk through our city and look at these buildings that are above their existing height limit. This one here is a 1911 building in a 40-foot height district, and it's about 65 feet. And the next one is a 1913 building, which is 15 feet above its height limit. And then this is my neighborhood, Alamo Square, a 1928 building that is 3 stories above its 40-foot height limit. And I think you probably all know the city really well, and you know there are many examples of buildings in this era that are beautiful community contributors and also above the 40-foot height limit. Gil touched on this a lot, so I think this probably, people who are willing to come out on a rainy night and talk about housing development in their neighborhoods and housing policy are probably engaged in our planning process a lot. And so we aren't changing your opportunity to participate in development in your neighborhood. There's still an opportunity, there's still a requirement for neighborhood notification. There's still a pre-application meeting. There's still CEQA. And there's still a required planning commission hearing. And there's some minor changes to that. And this reminds me, you all have on your seats a letter from CSFM that's not from the planning department. That's from the Coalition for San Francisco Neighborhoods. So I apologize if there's differing sets of information. George and I are great buds, but we have different ideas, and some of the information on that sheet is not totally accurate. So the one piece about neighborhood notification and neighborhood participation, that is not changing at all. Next slide. I love my graphic artist. Look at all this sliding around. This kind of walks you through our existing process. This isn't changing. So on the bottom, you see all the places that the city participates in design and community review. And on the top, you see all the times that the developer talks to the community before it goes to the Planning Commission. So every project in the local program and every project that's doing the 30% affordable and is requiring the 2 stories of height is required to go to the Planning Commission. There's a required public hearing with public notice, and the commission must vote and approve for the project. We also added 4 design guidelines. We have specific design guidelines for our team to use to review these projects that are taller than the permitted height limits. And just quickly before we get to the Q&A, I'm sure you all know we have a hearing at the Planning Commission. It's our 4th or 5th hearing at the Planning Commission on January 28th. After the Planning Commission reviews and makes any amendments, they may choose to act on the 28th. They are a recommending body. They are the lead of the planning department. They make recommendations to the Board of Supervisors. The Board of Supervisors has committees. This would be held at the Land Use Committee. So the Land Use Committee will have hearings on it before the full board would have hearings on it. And then any legislation that goes through those processes and is voted successfully would then go to the mayor for signature.
Yes, sir. I'm going to comment on the schedule. 28th is 3 weeks away. Not all the districts have even heard this yet. So it just strikes me is that for them to get neighborhood input and to think they're going to go through districts, collate that, and then come back and, if you don't understand it, get more feedback, frankly, is ludicrous. I mean, it's been here for years, the mayor's been talking about it for years, and now we're down to less than 3 weeks, and not even all the citizens of San Francisco had a chance to comment. That is not a plan, that is a process guided by a known decision that someone has already made.
I think I've heard a lot of comments about the process, and I can understand that. I think I talked to somebody, maybe it was you today, who called and said, "Hey, I've just heard about this meeting, and how can we be making this decision if I've just heard about this meeting?" And so, to be clear, we are having, Andy's our lead in setting up our community outreach, but we've had about 10 or 11 meetings scheduled. I don't think our last community meeting will happen in January. We anticipate to have some in February and probably March as well. So the feeling that you might have about the January 28th hearing this is not a culmination point, and I think that's the point we're trying to make here. There are many bodies, and there are many opportunities for both public and decision maker input and amendments. I've been working at the planning department for 10 years, maybe worked on 5 or 6 major pieces of legislation. I've never seen the community process stop at any point. All the way through the process, there will be further community outreach. So, do we have one more? Just that. So, Gil, do you want to go to the formal question and answer before we open it up to broad? And if you guys have more questions or comments, raise your hand and David